Good morning, everyone. Boker Tov. In this week's Torah portion, we have the story of Judah. Judah had three sons, Onan, and Shelah. And his oldest son, marries a woman by the name of Tamar, but unfortunately, tragically, he dies. And so, according to the laws of levirate marriage, his second son is destined to marry Tamar to bear a child on the family name. So Tamar now marries the younger brother, Onan. But tragically, he also dies. And now, according to the laws of levirate marriage, the youngest son, Shelah, must marry Tamar to bear a child from the family. But Yehuda doesn't want to allow his third son to marry the woman who his first two sons died with. And so he postpones it and he says, my son is too young, let's wait till he gets older. Tamar realizes that Yehuda is postponing and avoiding his son marrying her, and she knows she's destined to have a child who will be the future mother of Mashiach, the kings of Israel, all the way to the ultimate king of Mashiach, Messiah. And so she disguises herself as a harlot in this week's Torah portion and seduces Judah on the side of the road, engages with him, and then when she asks for payment, Judah says, I don't have any payment. And so he leaves her his ring, his signet ring, his walking stick, his staff, and his wrap, and says, I'll send payment. But then when he sends payment the next day, the messenger says, I couldn't find a harlot on the side of the road. Well, a month's pass, and Judah hears that Tamar is pregnant. Now, she was engaged to his youngest son, who he was postponing the wedding, but she was not allowed to be with another man. And so he calls for her to be brought out to be punished. And she sends a message to Judah. She sends the three items, the signet ring, the staff, and the wrap, and says, from the person to whom this owns, I am impregnated. And Judah confesses and says, she is more righteous than I am. I am the one who got her pregnant. Now, besides this being an incredible story of Judah falling and sinning and then ultimately doing teshuvah and rising to greatness and becoming the leader of the brothers and all the kings of Israel. But furthermore, our rabbis say we could learn something very powerful from Tamar. She was ready to be put to death rather than publicly shame Judah. Had Judah not admitted that he was the one, she said, to whom these belong. And if Judah would have not confessed, she would have been punished rather than shame him publicly. And our rabbis say from this, that you see that a person should be ready to throw themselves into a furnace rather than publicly shame another person. And in Pirkei Avot, it says that a person who shames another person publicly forfeits their portion in the world to come. It's considered one of the gravest sins. And when you wonder why Tamar merited to be the mother of royalty, of King David and the house of David and all the kings of Israel, to the future ultimate king of Mashiach, Messiah, it's because of this sacrifice that she was ready to make and not shame Judah. When I was a yeshiva boy growing up in Crown Heights by the Rabbi in the 1980s, there was a man who came to Crown Heights. An Israeli man, as many people came to live in the community, but this man's name was Shimon, and everyone knew him because unfortunately his face was very blown up, purple, his lips protruded from his face, and the word was that he was an IDF soldier in a tank that had blown up. He managed to survive, but his whole face was very deformed. Now the Rebbe would pray the afternoon service every day at exactly 3:15, and he would come into the mincha, and by the repetition of the Amidah, the Rebbe would sit in his seat on a bench by a table, and he would follow along the repetition of the Amidah. And the Rebbe did the exact same thing every day. He would put his hand on his forehead to concentrate word for word as the cantor recited the Amidah. Every day the Rebbe did the same thing, and everyone noticed it. One day the Rebbe sat down for the repetition but didn't put his hand on his forehead to concentrate. And everyone was shocked because the Rebbe was the most consistent person. He had done this for years and years. It was the first time he had not done this. Well, they waited to see what happened the next day. The next day he went back to putting his hand on his forehead. And it kept on fluctuating back and forth, and nobody could understand why all of a sudden the Rebbe changed his routine of always putting his hand on the forehead to concentrate. And then somebody figured it out. They noticed that whenever Shimon was in the room praying mincha, the Rebbe would take his hand down and not put it on his forehead. If Shimon was not in the room, the Rebbe would go back to his concentration with his hands on his forehead. And they realized that the Rebbe didn't want anyone to think that he was covering his eyes to not have to look at the face of Shimon because it was so deformed. And therefore, lest anyone suspect, the Rebbe would keep his hand down, just not to publicly shame him, even indirectly, to be a misunderstanding. What's so fascinating is that Shimon was blind. He would always have to walk with somebody aiding him because his whole face was injured in this tank. But yet, even though Shimon would not realize, but lest someone in the room realized, the Rebbe didn't want to, God forbid, shame another person. This is something we learn from Tamar, who merits to be the mother of royalty, because royalty is when you preserve the dignity of every single person. Have a wonderful day.